Okay, so we are now back, and we're in the middle of talking about the question of what Hamlet's true state of mind is, or is it really a very confused and possibly even unanswerable question? You know, to what extent can we try to arrive at some sensible conclusion to this question? What do you think? Any thoughts about that? Yeah, well, go ahead.
There's the great line where he's talking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are kind of spying on him, and he says, when the king and queen are deceived, I'm but mad north by northwest. When the wind blows southerly, I can tell a hawk from a handsaw. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not really crazy. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. he pretty much flat out tells them. Yeah, okay, okay. But I don't know if any of you have ever been around disturbed people. You know, I was in the medical service in the Army, and the second time that I was called into the United States Army, I was in one time and then got called back a second time. I was assigned to work with a psychiatrist. And some of the patients that we dealt with were either mildly disturbed or sometimes very seriously disturbed. And then I also, after that, worked in civilian hospitals and clinics and so forth for a while in my checkered career. You know, some people who are really very disturbed know that they are very seriously disturbed and they seek help. But some people really don't know that they're disturbed, and that's part of their problem, because there's this constant denial. Oh, you know, I'm not crazy. You know, it's the people around me who are crazy. You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, without getting too far off into that, you know, one could bring up the counter argument to what you just said, that while Hamlet is saying in the speech that you just referred to and elsewhere that he's not really mentally unbalanced or disturbed, that may be precisely one of the reasons why we would say he is seriously disturbed. Because after all, look at his behavior in a number of scenes. And let's take that. Did you have something you were going to add to that? Yeah, please do.
I was just going to say, I would probably lean toward the fact that he probably wasn't very disturbed. And I would say that because of the amount that he analyzed, him being disturbed and analyzed what happened. I think that most people who are disturbed, even if they do realize that they're disturbed, they don't analyze what happened in quite such a reasonable way as he does. I don't think they understand the facts maybe as clearly as he does.
That's a very interesting point, because he obviously is a very skillful analyst of his own feelings and of his own psychological disposition. That's true. That's a good point.
Well, and he's also very in control of himself. I mean, he says, you know, don't tell them, you know, if I act this way, it's because I don't want him to suspect anything because of what may happen later. And if he's able to predict his behavior in the future and where this is going to lead to, I would say that would be the mind of a pretty rational individual. Okay. Well, that's a very interesting line of reasoning. Well, let's put this to the test by actually thinking about a couple of scenes. And the first scene that I'm talking about is the scene in which Polonius is meeting with Claudius and Gertrude, and he says, "Oh, listen, you know, your son has a very, very serious problem. I mean, a really, really serious problem. And I think that he is mad, and I think that it is love which has driven him mad," which, of course, is kind of a silly cliche. But Polonius, in some ways, is kind of a silly person, too.
But in any event, he offers in part as evidence that according to his daughter, Ophelia, Polonius says, when she told him about this, that Hamlet came into her room and he behaved in this very, very strange way. You know, his clothes were sort of in disarray. He is staring into space. He's just acting in a very odd way, and she knew him very well. I mean, how well did she know him? What do we know about the kind of relationship that they had? I mean, how close was their relationship? How intimate even was their relationship? Do we have any evidence? What comes up in the graveyard scene in Act 5, Scene 1? Gertrude actually makes a comment about this.
She says that she thought that they would marry. That was her assumption.
That's right. That they were so close and so intimate with one another that Gertrude, and presumably others as well, might well have expected that they would get married. Right? Okay, now that's an interesting point. By the way, Branagh, in his version of the play, actually has these very quick cuts in which he shows the two of them in bed together. I mean, actually having sex together. I mean, it's not like some big sex scene, I don't mean that, but it's, you know, just very, very brief cuts, which are intercut with other materials, with other shots. And so it's very clear that what Branagh is indicating is that they not only had an intimate relationship, but an intimate sexual relationship. Well, then we come back to the scene in which Polonius says, okay, you know, your son is really mad, and he reads the letter, you know, that's filled with all of these romantic cliches. And he's making stylistic comments about that. And Gertrude says to him, more matter with less art. And so finally, Polonius convinces Claudius and Gertrude that they should have some kind of a test to find out if indeed Hamlet is mad, and if indeed it is love which has driven him mad. And so Polonius says, I'll loose my daughter on him. I'll loose my daughter on him. So they set up a scene in which she's walking in a hall, and now Claudius and Polonius are going to be behind, I mean, in the original, it's behind an arras, which is a kind of tapestry. But obviously, if you're going to set that in more recent times, that's going to be some other device. Branagh comes up with a very interesting device, by the way. But then Hamlet is going to come in, and they are going to be in hiding and observing his behavior towards Ophelia to find out if he is mad, A, and B, if it is love which has driven him mad. So how does he behave towards Ophelia in that scene? Does anybody remember how he behaves towards Ophelia? So
he's mean to her.
yeah, he is mean to her. He's very.
After she tries to return the things that he's given to her, letters and whatnot.
Yeah, but he's really, really, really. I mean, the word mean is really kind of an understatement. I mean, he's really, really harsh towards her. And then when he says to her, you know, get thee to a nunnery go, what do you think that means? Does anybody know? What does that line mean? There were people who used the word nunnery at that time as a slang term, not simply for a convent of nuns, but for what? A house of prostitutes.
Okay, so I mean, he's really giving it to her. I mean, he's very hard on her, and he talks about how women can, you know, deceive men and you know, get out of my sight. And the way this is actually played in some cases is he'll even throw her down. I mean, watch the Olivier version or watch the Branagh version. And he's actually physically violent. I mean, it doesn't hit her with a fist or anything like that, but he's actually quite physical with her. And Mel Gibson is in the Zeffirelli version too, quite physical with her. Okay, so my point here is, what does that tell us really about Hamlet and Hamlet's mental stability or madness? What's at issue here? Any thoughts about that? Claudius is not convinced. He says, you know, this is not love. His feelings do not that way tend. You know, what's at stake here? One of the things that is at stake is, he answers his own question. One of the things at stake here is the issue of whether or not he knows that he's being spied on. Does he know or does he not know that he is being spied on? If he knows that he's being spied on by Claudius and Polonius, when he supposedly is there all alone with Ophelia, whom he should be able to trust, and with whom he obviously has a very intimate relationship. If he thinks that this is all a trap, and he's being spied on, then his behavior toward her makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's really, really mean towards her. He insults her, as this is actually put on stage or film. Sometimes he'll even push her down on the floor. Now, does he or does he not know? I mean, that's very interesting. In the Olivier version, Olivier stages that in such a way that Hamlet sees the two of them go behind the arras. And so a lot of the time, he actually points towards the place where he knows that they are hiding. But that's not in the text of the play. I mean, I defy anybody to pick up the play and find evidence that Hamlet actually knows. Okay? That is an interpretation of the scene. That's not something which is simply there. Okay? In the Branagh version, yeah, did you have a comment to make on that?
I was just going to say, whether he knows or not that he's getting spied on, he still knows that his sanity is in question, and he knows that his life is in danger, and that can be a really major driving force. And he knows that everybody's against him, and that his actions at this point, like, can be the life or death of him. And you know, he's apparently a really smart man and a good actor up to this point. So, you know. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. That's a very good observation. And he has, in the past, as we heard earlier from Polonius, he has in the past acted very strangely and very much out of character around her. Okay? We're going to see other instances where if people act very much out of character, that is taken as a sign that they are mad. As Ophelia in her so-called mad scene. Okay? Yeah.
Well, plus, he's whether or not he's crazy, he's very dedicated to making himself seem as though he's crazy to accomplish what he wants to accomplish, and using Ophelia is obviously not beyond him, which is sort of a Machiavellian thing, sort of too, which kind of makes sense later when she is dead, how upset he is about that.